And I'll be like, ah, okay. So now we've traveled back to this past life. We've got this information. The way that this past life has been affecting her, can she now be released from it? Because she's told me she's learned her lesson. She's told me she understood the lesson.
Yeah.
So now can she be released from it? Generally, the higher self will say yes. Sometimes the higher self will add a caveat to that and will say, yes, she can be released from the effects of this past life, but she has to do A, B, C, D. She needs to
Yeah.
support herself and make these changes in
Yes.
her life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another series of transparent conversations through the magical doors. We've had a bit of a break of the last year, and I'm very, very excited to be resuming this. It felt like the energy was calling for it, and I was really looking forward to connecting with more people that are doing really wonderful work in the world. And discussing all things about consciousness, shadow, expansion, alignment, magic, and healing. So I'm really excited to be welcoming a really beautiful lady called Georgina. Georgina, lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, lovely.
I have had the pleasure to be Georgina's client last month, where I got to experience a really beautiful modality called Quantum Healing Hypnosis. And Georgina is going to tell us all about it. Over the last 5 years, Georgina has been the founder of Anena Therapy and a practitioner of Quantum Healing Hypnosis, created by Dolores Cannon. Georgina in 2021 connected with her galactic guides, discovered her starseed beginnings, and she now channels directly from the golden beings of light. She is the author of 2 books, The Girl with the Starseed Soul, I love that name so much, and What Would Love Say, which, if I remember well, that's your most recent published book.
That's right. Yeah.
Lovely. So we have a lot of juiciness to discuss about Georgina. Georgina believes that human beings are multidimensional creatures with the ability to heal ourselves given the right conditions, which I think is a really beautiful place to start. If that's okay with you, Georgina.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the right conditions. What do you feel tend to be the right conditions for us beings, especially as multidimensional beings? What constitutes right conditions in your understanding? But I'm also kind of curious to know from your perspective, where does suffering come into it as a catalyst? Do you feel suffering is something that is helpful, that we needed in order to evolve? And as the energies are shifting and moving into the new earth, I'm kind of curious to know your perspective about it all, and from your experience as a practitioner as well. So curious to know your thoughts on this.
It's a good question. I believe that people find what's right for them when they're at particular points during their life. And I also believe that for QHHT, what I recognize in a lot of my clients is that they're quite often at the end of quite a long journey. That could be a spiritual journey, an openness journey, an explorative journey, or it could be, like you said, a journey of pain or struggling. That can be emotional pain or physical pain. And QHHT seems to be one of those modalities that comes quite far down one or other of those journeys. Most of my clients have gone through an openness journey already, or they've gone through a lot of challenges, shall we say, in their lives. And I understand that actually it's very important that people get to that place, because I feel like that level of exploration offers somebody the opportunity to look at things from the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And that's basically what QHHT is. You know, we're not looking just at this individual life that we're living now. And that's why it's multi-dimensional work, because we're looking at exploring more than just this life.
Yeah.
And often we don't recognize where something can be coming from: a fear, a phobia, a belief system, a behavioral pattern, a coping strategy, whatever it is. It may not necessarily be coming from this current life. And that's why it's multidimensional. And that's why the people that come to me have a certain openness, because they're willing to explore beyond just this lifetime. And, you know, often what we find when we're working in this way is that the struggle that the person is coming to me because of looking to unpick will be something from a past life. You know, that's very normal, because that's how deep we can go. That's how big we look at the picture.
And it makes sense what you're saying in terms of, I guess, in a way, people come to you, you said a little bit further down the journey, where maybe they've kind of experienced a multitude of sort of situations and sort of perspectives in something to be open to want to explore, maybe, I guess, past lives. And I'm curious to know, like, as somebody who specializes, I guess, in past life hypnosis, you know, how I love it. Sounds like, from what you're saying, that people tend to be quite open by the time they come to you, and I love that, you know, something that for some people might be a little bit more close-minded to consider past lives. I love that, you know, there's such an openness to kind of go there, and maybe they've explored quite a few different pathways and avenues before they get to you. I'm really impressed with that, in fact, actually, because I think that it does feel like one of those things that maybe it wouldn't be quite as accessible. I don't know why, you know, thinking about past lives, maybe for some people. Are the people that come to you generally people who maybe have experienced quite a few healing sort of formats before, or experiences where they've been facilitated to experience change and transformation, would you say? Or
Some and some. I mean, from the point of view that the type of people that are going to be interested in this work, you would expect generally that they've discovered Dolores Cannon, you know, and her work. At the beginning of my career, so I'm in like my 6th year now, at the beginning, I was connecting with people who were far less open, which was interesting. And they were coming for more understanding about themselves and the trauma in this current life. With the view of exploring that in a relaxed hypnosis state. And as my journey's gone on, and as I've grown, and as my understanding has developed, then obviously I'm connecting with people who are at the level that I'm at with my openness. And I'm sure as my journey goes on, you know, like attracts like, doesn't it? And
absolutely.
I'm sure as my journey goes on and I discover more and I learn more, then the people that come to me are going to be also more like me in my future versions of myself. So I feel like maybe it's kind of nowadays 80% of people come to me who are already on a type of openness path. They've done previous explorations of a different type. And I also feel like that is an expression of what's happening on the earth right now. We went through the big C, didn't we? So people have definitely had that opportunity to look at life in a different way. And that's all this work is. It's just looking, like all spiritual work, it's just about looking at life in a slightly different way.
Absolutely. But I definitely, though, resonate with what you're sharing as a practitioner myself. I definitely resonate with this bit that, in a way, your level of, because you're a seasoned practitioner by now. I know well established in your practice. And the more you build your confidence in it, the more you own and embody it, the easier it is to kind of like let it resonate and receive what resonates from it from other people, and for that to attract the people who are kind of on the same wavelength. I think I really resonate with that. And I mean, even when I came to do this work with you, it's interesting because although I was aware of this being very much like connected to past life, the healing, the hypnosis we'll be doing, even the first life we explored, for a few seconds in the beginning, I thought, like, when we visited a sort of environment that is not connected to my own environment, I thought, hang on a minute, but this has nothing to do with my life. And then I had to kick in, like, straight away, think, oh yeah, of course, because it's not really meant to connect with the scenarios in my current life. But I think it took a moment, like, a few seconds for that to kick in. And I love the openness. I love that we are at that stage at that level of consciousness, I think, and openness in our planet, where we can explore those kind of themes so openly. I'd love to know a little bit about your background, Georgina. Obviously, I'm curious always about that sort of time of, because we're talking about you talked a little bit about that moment of readiness for people, and kind of I wonder what that moment of readiness was for you, or if you like those turning points or that moment or moments in your life. I just find that such a kind of interesting time, or place in someone's timeline, that kind of like turning point or turning points that led you into, I guess, your own healing, and then led into this body of work as well that you stepped into through Dolores Cannon as well. So I'd love to know whatever you want to share about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess, my journey as far as being aware of multidimensional experiences goes back quite far. I'm 52 nearly, and I understood about multidimensional communication when I was 10 years old. It's a long story, but at the time I had a best friend at school whose sister had passed, and her mum took her to see a medium. And we were 10, and we had this discussion around it. And I knew at 10 years old that multidimensional communication was possible. It didn't seem like an extreme fantasy to me. And in fact, there was early on, I was just like, yeah, I know I'm going to do that when I'm grown up. I kind of knew. It did take another 10 years before I had my own direct experience with an alternative dimension. My nan passed, and a couple of years after she passed, I had my first communication with her when she was in spirit, and that was when I was in my early 20s. But I kept all of that stuff under wraps. I didn't tell anyone about it because I didn't really understand what it meant. I knew it was happening, but I didn't really know how to work through it, who was safe to talk to about this. So I just kept it to myself. And that was the case until I was, I guess, for another 10 years, really, until I was in my early 30s. And then I started to become very sick, physically and emotionally, very sick. I was diagnosed in 2003 with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and I basically spent 3 years debilitated.
Wow.
Unable to really walk, talk, see, eat, all of the usual things that we do. And it took me 3 years to really kind of recover and be able to.
How were you then when that happened?
I was in my mid-30s.
Right.
And that was the point at which I recognized that, well, basically conventional medicine let me down. My doctor at the time said, you've got ME, there's absolutely nothing I can do to help you. If I could give you a magic pill, then I would, but I can't go home, just wait it out. You might get better, you might not. Go to some support groups. I went to support groups. All of these people were in wheelchairs, and I was like, that is not going to be me. I'm not letting that happen. And then I guess I made it my mission to start looking for the non-conventional supports. I started looking at Reiki, I started looking at reflexology, I started looking at angels, I started looking at crystals, I started meditating, I started doing yoga. I started to gravitate to all of those things that had been calling me for a very long time, but that I'd chosen to push away and try and have a normal life. But this so-called normal life just led me to pain, because really what I needed to be doing was expressing those parts of myself that I'd been pushing to one side. I'd been wearing a mask, I'd been trying to work in corporate recruitment, and pushing away all of the ability that I had. And then I really discovered Dolores' work in 2018, when I realized I had a phobia, terrible phobia. That was the reason I went. Discovered a past life where this phobia had come from. Discovered past lives also that were keeping me in a state of fight or flight, in a sort of level of survival. And through these past lives that I traveled, my life entirely changed. Absolutely changed in every way. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, something magnificent happened.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'd been looking for something. To be fair, I'd been looking for something that I could say was mine, that I could learn, but that I could also bring to people, because I had this absolute burning desire to help people. I've always had it, and I've tried to help people in different ways.
But it wasn't your way.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd watched other people in my life having their projects, building their businesses, and I was always like, where's my thing? Where's my thing? And then I had this QHHT session. I was like, I know this is it. This is my thing. It's changed my life. I have to learn it. I have to train, and I have to bring it to my local community, because this is important. And what I recognized as soon as I started delving deeper into the study, before I read anything about it, before I actually started studying, I realized I already knew how to do it. I
Yeah.
already knew the technique, and I didn't know why. And I was like, why do I find this so easy? I can do this. I've never been that good at something before. And then it was like a year or so later, I had an Akashic record reading, and I was told that, well, you've spent many, many past lives practicing this technique.
Wow, my goodness.
Dolores was my mentor in an Atlantean life, and I was remembering QHHT. And that's why it's so easy for me.
I'm not surprised. You feel very grounded. I think we connected online, I don't know, last year, the year before, I'm not sure. But like I could tell like how aligned and connected you were with what you were doing. It just feels like you're just it. You're doing it, you're in it. It feels very much like embodied, and it felt like you definitely like mission led, and kind of just the expansion through this, and that you just really had landed in it. I'm not surprised, but I loved how you took me through your journey from your early years, and in a way also kind of then you talking about when you, even back then as a young little girl, when you had a sense of, I know this, I know I'll be doing this. And this thing of like, and then later on with QHHT, again, it's this thing of like remembering, in a way, there's that remembrance and kind of that connection to the fact that the soul is so old. The soul is connected, and eventually the work that you do is the work of the soul, right? It's like the journeys of the soul, and remembering, bringing those pieces of ourselves, of our true consciousness and our true beingness, I guess. And I really love that there's kind of like different storylines throughout your lifetime around this remembrance. And I
Yeah, and
really resonate with
I
that.
I feel like it's important for me that I've had the experiences that I have done as a human
Yeah.
in this lifetime, because it helps me to connect with all of the people that come to me. I don't feel like I would have been ready to do this work until
Yeah.
I found it. I needed to have had enough of my own experiences, joy and suffering and pain.
Yeah.
I've had depression twice in my life, so I know about the darkness of depression. And what I recognize nowadays is that the people that come to me, it's so interesting. We sit on the sofa and we start talking about their lives, and there will always be big parts of their lives which I could almost say was my story too.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I believe that for sure.
Mm.
And I can say you were such a beautiful space holder, because the way Georgina facilitates the sessions is, I think you mentioned, is how one of my current clients actually does QHHD. She's a practitioner, specializes in womb healing. She's incredible. I know you mentioned the original form of QHHD or delivery, I guess. It's really spending a whole day with a practitioner. I think this is how Dolores have wanted and has been doing it. This
Yeah.
is how you've done it. I know when I came to your beautiful space, I felt like came into a retreat space. You literally spent hours where you held space for me to, and you did it so beautifully, to just share about my life, my timeline. And there was a lot to share, and it felt like it kind of really flowed, so that, how important is this? Because I feel I feel really passionate about this myself, this space holding aspect. Obviously the tools and the modalities and all that and what they do is magical and important, but how important is this space holding? Especially, okay, here's the thing, especially, I don't know if you experience that, I see so many of my clients and so much of my own experience has been like the lack of witnessing has been so impactful. Like we have not been witnessed in our joy and in our pain, in our younger ages. We have not been witnessed maybe as much as our souls have needed to be witnessed, by those who loved us, by our caretakers, not because necessarily they didn't want to, but maybe they didn't, and maybe they didn't have they hadn't been witnessed, so they didn't know how to do it. But how important do you find that as part of the process of, I guess, holding space in terms of for the healing that is to follow later?
It's extremely important.
And why? Yes,
You couldn't have one without the other. I believe that the reason why QHHC is so powerful is because of those two parts of the day, and you said rightly there that I facilitate my sessions in exactly the way that Dolores always did. I know there's practitioners out there that maybe devote a specific amount of time.
Sure.
I choose not to do that because I'm a purist when it comes to Dolores. She created the technique, and that's how I feel it should be facilitated. And there isn't a time limit attached to the day, because everyone's unique and special, and everyone needs a different amount of time. If I was to say, okay, we're going to cut this short at 5 o'clock, and we hadn't done the work, then I wouldn't be offering my client everything that they needed. So the conscious talking is important because it's exactly that. It's conscious talking. It's the opportunity for the person that I'm working with to reflect on their whole entire current life. And like we talk about everything from the earliest memories going through growing up, schooling, further education, jobs, all the relationships. And there's two reasons for that, really. The first is because how often does a person get offered that?
Yeah.
How often does a person have an opportunity to just sit and talk, to not be interrupted, to just allow the higher self to come through and speak and guide. And this non-interruption, which I believe is what makes it powerful, there's an organic flow that starts to take place, and the person sitting comfortably and they're consumed in their story, but they're sharing it in a non-judgmental, safe space. And it's very unusual. You know, even in conventional therapy, you'll have the therapist asking questions. I tend not to speak that much because that allows the person to speak for 4 hours, you know.
And actually, I really appreciated that there was that it did feel very, like, I spent years of my 20s in therapy, and I really appreciated the fact that it didn't have that same format at all, you know. Because the therapist will bring, and I was trained as a counselor, you know, bring their own interventions, even through sort of picking things and paraphrasing and all that. And in a way, there wasn't that paraphrasing or there was just a real space of pure holding to share. And I know you want to share more with this, because you said there's 2 parts. There's that part and there's the second part. And then I'll ask you some more around this. Yeah.
And really, you know, in order for me to do my job as the practitioner of Dolores' work, if I didn't understand anything about my client, then when we worked in the kind of the deeper part of the day, in the space when somebody has an altered state of consciousness, where the ego is allowed to be pushed to one side, as it were, and then this beautiful flow of whatever information is going to come through comes through. If I didn't know anything about the person I'm working with, then I would be confused maybe around why this information was coming up. Why was it important for this particular past life to come up? When I know about a client, as soon as we start traveling through a past life, I'll know. I think, oh, okay, so that's why they're being shown this, because it answers a question that I know they're looking for an answer to. And that allows me to effectively, gently direct them through it. So it's about trust. It's about building rapport. It's about helping a person to feel safe, you know. And if a person doesn't feel safe, then they're not going to go under.
You do a really beautiful job with this, I have to say. Not only that, I totally see how it all kind of binds together. I think that the sharing that has taken place, and then I think you had your request from each person to, you know, to bring any questions that you might want, that we might need to kind of ask as a way of like resolving things or getting down to the bottom of it. And I think bringing those questions and bringing the intention, I guess, behind those questions were also another really beautiful way, because you sat down with me to even like word them, you know. When I brought them in, you really helped me kind of like identify what I wanted to get to the bottom of, you know. And I think that knowing that background felt really instrumental in how the weaving that sort of took place, you know, from the experiences. So it really did make a lot of sense, the value of that. And like you said, from more than just the perspective, there's the perspective of being witnessed and heard. Can I ask you, when you're in that first part with clients, how often or not do you hear from people saying kind of like, I don't know, like maybe realizing or just saying like, gosh, I didn't realize this, I felt that about this, or I've never said this to anybody, or, you know, I'm curious to know what's your experience been with your clients so far around that first bit of being witnessed. How are they receiving that? How does it feel for them? Do they share something about it that's like feels very different or new or whatever? I'm curious to know.
Yeah,
What that's
I'd say 99.9% of the time, people will, towards the end of the conversation, when we're kind of wrapping it up, and I'll always say, you know, it was an absolute honor to listen to your story. I think that you're an amazing human being, because I feel that way about everyone that I work with. And they'll often say to me then, well, thank you for listening. I've never told anyone about
Wow.
this part of me, or, it's very normal for people to say, I'd forgotten about a lot of those
Yeah.
experiences that I went through. But because you gave me the space to just work through it, knowing that I didn't have a time limit attached to how long this took me, it allowed me to relax. And memories came up that I'd forgotten about. And I'll say, well, it's beautiful that you've offered that feedback to me, but it's not only me offering you the space, it's my understanding that you're working with the higher self. The
Sure.
higher self is the part of you that knows everything about you. And the moment you found me, the moment we had a conversation, the moment you sat down and started writing up the questions that you were going to bring to the session with you, questions that you wanted answers to, that's when the higher self started working. That part of you knew exactly what was going to be said when we're talking, and that part of you knows exactly what it's going to offer you when you're under. I don't do this. I don't make this happen.
I wonder though, and I think absolutely, but I do think that the person that's going to do the receiving really kind of affects the information that the higher self is also, and the context and the intent of the session that's being held there for the client, really in a way kind of influences and impacts on on the fact that all this information will come through. That maybe if it was to be shared with a friend, maybe because the intent would be very different, maybe the same sharing wouldn't have happened, or some information, some details, And I think there's definitely something to be said about the sacredness of the space holding that happens in the context of how you do it. And I mean, I remember bringing my blueberries. It's like bringing my popcorn in as I'm sharing my story. I've done it so much now but it's like I just sort of felt like, okay, but now I'll just bring the blueberries, I'll bring the popcorn, the drink. It's all really fun to do. And what surprised me was how it felt like it went kind of, it didn't feel like it took long and long and long. It felt like it went faster than I expected, considering had a whole day together. And then obviously the space that was facilitated during the hypnosis, I just have to say, like, I really love your voice. Your voice is pure magic. I think your voice has in itself like the capacity to heal, and I think it's a gift in itself. Personally, I don't think it's like, I think it brings something very unique to the experience. But I really, really loved it. I've got a few questions, but I kind of want to go with the flow of this experience and what's kind of being shared here. And I guess I'm curious to know from your experience, as people complete the work with you, a day's work, and I know you tend to say to people, just come for one session, you won't need to necessarily see me again. And I love that, I'm curious to know, when you do have a catch up, if you do have a catch up with people, in terms of the shifts they're experiencing, and we know obviously it's a process, it's for many people, but I'm curious to know what they give as feedback, or how they experience themselves integrating back into, I guess, having access to elite parts of themselves in past lives. What are some of these sort of aha moments that people tend to have as they go back into, I guess, integrating it all? And I don't mean just in terms of the actual things that they want to resolve alone, but as an experience in itself. What's some of the keys,
I feel like, if you want to talk immediately about the physical sense that everyone experiences when I bring them round and I sit them up and I give them some water, pretty much everyone says, oh my God, I feel so much lighter. And there's a sense, an immediate sense of feeling unburdened, which is energetically what's just taken place. You know, when we work through past lives, it's not just about having the experience of gathering information. It's also there's a release that takes place when a person travels back through past lives. And let's remember, those past lives have come up for a reason. And when we travel back through a past life, if we have been energetically remained attached to some trauma, for example, in a past life, then when we travel through that past life, we acknowledge the lessons, we acknowledge the purpose. And then when the person's under and I'm working directly with the higher self, I'll ask for the person to be released from any negative attachment to that past life. So, of course, there'll be a feeling of lightness because energetically there's been a lot of release that's taken place.
Yeah.
And I guess that the feedback that I receive from people, you know, normally it'll be weeks afterwards. They'll have a sense, and this word erased gets used quite a lot. And this was my personal experience, that when people come to me, if they have a certain type of block around something that they want to achieve, maybe a way that they want to move forwards, it feels as though the block has been erased. But what's interesting is that it doesn't leave a gap. It doesn't leave a space.
No.
It doesn't leave a hole. You know, like if we give up something, normally a habit, a behavior, then we'll feel as though we're missing something because that habit or behavior has been let go. But with QHHT, it's very interesting that it's almost as though the part that we no longer need gets released, but it doesn't leave a space. The only type of space that it leaves is a shift to manifest more good stuff. It's a subtle feeling, and people generally just feel good.
I definitely resonate with that. I can say I could share a bit of my experience if you want.
Please do.
It's been a month now, and I've had a very interesting kind of reflecting back in both I guess the lifetimes I accessed, and in one of them I was a man, was initially a boy who grew into a man. So the timeline from when he was growing, what was particularly interesting was this man didn't get to follow like doing like the work he wanted to do, and the excited, the I guess exploring what his soul was kind of asking from him, what he wanted to do. And he had a little bit of mishap with some friends who had the project, and they went their separate ways, and he kind of went into a direction professionally that wasn't his thing. And it's very interesting because I have chosen a path that feels very much in alignment, and feel I was in a way, if anything, hard to kind of really like step into, and letting go of other stuff. And it was illness that kind of pushed me to let go of the stuff that I was doing before and realign me, I guess, similarly to you. But what's interesting was, I think that what I was shown was this guy went into having a life with a wife that he loved, doing something he wasn't as keen on, being left by his wife. Eventually they had a child together, and it wasn't until later on in his life that he felt like, okay, he started following a little bit more, going back to reclaiming what he wanted for himself. But what was interesting, it was that the reason he did that was because his dad always kind of said, like, you have to be the provider, you have to step into this role and you have to do this. And in a way, he felt like he had to do what his dad was saying. I come from a very kind of like, from a more traditional background, I guess you could say. My dad was quite liberal in many ways, but on the front of what you do with your life, I always kind of like, it was always shown to us that it really matters to kind of be very practical. And I am so not practical in what I've chosen for myself. I'm like completely the other way. But like, in a way, that's been the right path for me. But there's always been the little bit of the judgment in my mind. And I think it's played out a little bit like of kind of a little bit of there's a sense of I'm going against something, you know, and this has not felt like this since that experience. And not only that, it has felt like it's almost like, I don't know, it's a very strange thing to even trying to communicate, but it's just kind of affirmed that I've been heading in the right direction. And that when things get a little bit tougher, because, you know, the path of kind of just working for yourself, not working for other people, choosing a path where you have to carve your own way as well, especially as a psychic coach, you know, has been an interesting one. And it's almost like seeing this man kind of choosing different and then being unhappy has put me a lot more at ease about the choices I'm making. And it's kind of taken away that inner conflict about my ancestral stuff, you know, and particularly around my father connection, you know, and also because the masculine version, the masculine part of me, I think I have a very balanced, like I've been told, masculine and feminine, but there was a time when my masculine was overtaking. And I think that, you know, kind of like as a mom to a boy, now I just feel like I really want to be like really promoting the values that feel very valuable to me around following your path, you know, and not teaching my son to feel that he has to be making choices as the masculine provider, whatever, you know. I guess as a summary to say, I felt a lot more at peace with it's not that I had a major conflict around this, you know, and there was a bunch of other stuff around this dynamic, his partner leaving and all that were interesting, that have other kind of connections for me. But that felt really important. And it's almost like I feel like it brought some kind of peace with my masculine part that has, because I'm a single parent, you know, and I'm the sole provider in a way for my son. I mean, I co-parent, but in terms of my situation. So that has been really interesting and like almost like, but there's a support in this that has felt very different to how it felt before.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say. It's different, but it's subtle on the same time. It feels supportive and it feels there's a sense of peace around. This has been such a right choice, you know, and it's like, you know, because I've had a turbulent relationship with my family, this has felt like, you know, it's this thing of like saying yes to oneself, to one's soul, to our soul's calling is essentially, you know, it's not about saying no to people. It's about saying yes to your soul and what's in alignment to you, you know. So that has been really wonderful for me. And the other one was very interesting because there was a connection to domestic violence that I was fleeing. And when I worked in domestic violence, I just felt like I was in the right place. I felt like this job is for me. I'm meant to be advocating for these women. I've like put myself on the, like, I've really felt this is work that I'm meant to be doing. That was years ago. And all I can say is I feel like I've released that's I think the suffering that came from having been a woman in domestic abuse. It's felt like kind of like I knew that it wasn't connected in my life at all because I've had very loving partners, but there was a part of, on a soul level energy, that there was a part of me that has kind of felt a little bit too close to that, and this just doesn't feel, you know, part of it anymore, you know. It's this thing of like, these things can be very subtle, and like I said, you don't experience soul loss around this. It just feels like a smooth transition, because in my experience, like with shamanic work that I do, we do a lot of soul retrieval. There's a process to do so that we kind of like, in a way where there's a soul loss experience, soul loss, you know, we need to kind of like fill that back in with something new, you know. And there's an integration process after that. So yeah, it did feel very valuable, and I feel like I'm curious for more, actually, in some ways. And I've done past life work before in different ways, and I work with theta, but it definitely feels like it kind of does become an integrated experience, kind of quite seamlessly almost. You don't need to do much after you come out of this to integrate it and to sort of like to really get how it's assisting you.
Well, I am so happy that that's been your experience. I
Yeah.
really am. It's just amazing, and thank you for sharing. I mean, it's wonderful, and you're so right to use the word subtle.
Yeah.
That is a word that if people ask me, how will I feel afterwards? How long will it take for me to see changes? How long will it take for me to feel better? I always say, well, I can't say
Yeah. It's
completely
such
because I have
a,
no
yeah.
idea, but I try to remember to use the word subtle because I feel it is subtle, but that is the amazing thing about QHHT, that it's powerful in so much as we do all of that deep work in one day, and that has an incredible effect on a person.
Yeah.
But what I also love about the work is the next day after a session, yes, you might feel tired, but you don't wake up and feel as though you're an entirely different
Oh,
person.
I felt great. I
Mm,
felt slept really well. If anything, I felt more kind of even at peace. My sleep felt really, really good
mm.
and
Yeah.
very peaceful. And I think that it was because the process had already done things for me. And I think then the weeks that followed for me personally was kind of like a little bit of like that, me kind of getting what's happened and really sort of like seeing it take place. I think I'm quite experienced with working with multidimensionally, so that's why I've been kind of very conscious of this experience. But talking about that being subtle, let's just say also that the experiences with the past lives were very vivid. Like there was not, do you know what I mean? Like they were definitely you're clear like what's going on. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I even got you asked me about a book that was written about the experience that I've had and other women have had. I was part of the book, and you said like it'd be interesting to see if you get the title of the book if you Google that. And I Googled it because I got a name, and I found the book. It was about domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the information was there. So it was very interesting in itself.
Yeah. And, that's what people love. People love proof.
Evidence.
They want evidence, exactly. And I've worked with a number of clients who have been famous authors or poets, and they've left me and they've researched, because I normally try to get a name if I can. Obviously, I don't want the left side of the brain to kick in too
Take over
much
too
and
much.
start. Yeah, exactly. But if I can gently ask a question, what do you look like? Where do you like to hang out? Who are, if I can get a name, then I will. If I can get a title of a book, I can. I normally sense whether that's available or whether that's going to take somebody into a state of kind of looking for logic or questioning the
Yeah,
situation.
exactly.
But for you were deep.
So very clearly was there, the name was there, it was very clear, and all the information. And in a way, it's almost like also that reminder, revisiting that life was like, it's not a coincidence, the choices we make
Yeah.
in a lifetime, they're all connected to versions of ourself that has been reincarnated throughout different lives, right? And our soul essentially is that kind of library of all those places. And I mean, I do a lot of Akashic work, and that's an interesting experience as well to do. And it's like, so it's not surprising that we'll experience this. And in a way, quantum healing, it's a soul healing, isn't it? Healing those pieces of ourselves that through those lifetimes we experience kind of difficulty, or maybe there was trauma, or there was, and there was that revisiting, re-witnessing, reclaiming, re-looking at things and reprocessing, and being able to maybe create a closure that wasn't. And I think that was, important to share about the process that you do. There's a closure. And for so many people, we might think, oh my gosh, I haven't got a closure from my ex, or this and that. And you know what? It might be that it has nothing to do with the ex. It might have been also that closure you didn't get with this ex, because it's also because there was a closure that wasn't gotten from here or there. And it's a pattern of your soul that's been created. And you're going back to the life where you sort of like go and like nip it in the bud, where you kind of like address it. And that's why the repatterning changes, or there's a new repatterning, or there's a new way of moving forward, because we kind of went and addressed it to the, maybe it might not be the point of creation, but a significant lifetime that kind of really instigated an important shift, or an important kind of aspect of the pattern,
And also, it's important when a client is under that. Textbook would be that when I got to work directly with the higher self, the subconscious, which is an hour's work towards the end of the hypnosis part, then it's important for me to communicate with that part of a person and ask, why did you bring forward this life that you chose to show today? What has that got to do with this person now? And the higher self, the person, you, for example, will feel the information coming through you, and you'll just know the answers because it's coming from a higher place. And then that part of you will be able to vocalize the exact reason why a past life was brought up and how it's been affecting a person now. That's important, to ask. Okay, so you brought this life forward.
Why?
Why is it? Yeah, how has it been affecting? Yeah, how's it been affecting this person? And it might not be obvious. And the higher self will say, well, she hasn't told you, but she feels like this about a certain situation, and this is why. And I'll be like, okay. So now we've traveled back to this past life. We've got this information. The way that this past life has been affecting her, can she now be released from it? Because she's told me she's learned her lesson. She's told me she understood the lesson. So now can she be released from it? Generally, the higher self will say yes. Sometimes the higher self will add a caveat to that and will say, yes, she can be released from the effects of this past life, but she has to do A, B, C, D. She needs to support herself and make these changes in her life to align with a new way of moving ahead, if you like. And that's important. There is that part of a person that has to take responsibility for anything that's offered from the higher self. I'll align a person with those changes, but it's their responsibility to be conscious of what those changes are. Life doesn't look different unless we make changes.
And that it could be, the changes could be from like physical changes to just a shift in our awareness, to maybe where we place our focus more. It could be to patterns of behavior, to just habitual responses and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes they might not even like feel very 100% clear, but it's almost like just the healing that has taken place will bring that awareness and facilitate the change more automatically as well, in some cases. I mean, when I tune into energy for people, it's very interesting because they'll tell me a block about something, and when we tap into the energy, it will take me somewhere that nobody expected in some cases, not them, not me. And I just follow the what comes out of it is incredible. And sometimes we don't even like,
sometimes it's not obvious.
It's not obvious at all. And it might be like such an unexpected kind of like caveat there. And I think this is why, in a way, however we facilitate that sort of multidimensional healing and traveling and channeling, whatever, it's this thing of like, the rational mind can only take us so far. You know, I loved counseling and I love digging into my past, but A and B won't necessarily take you to what you think it will, or by doing this and this, it might be a different pathway to that. And sometimes that's why those kind of modalities can be so useful, to kind of open up, go beyond the rational, you know. Georgina.
No, that's really what working with the higher self is, you
Yeah.
know, when we can access the part of us, you know, often when I'm talking to people, we're doing the chatting and then we get to the questions and they'll say, well, I feel like you've answered a lot of these questions. And I'll say, well, I haven't. We've talked about them from a conscious perspective, but the higher self will have a completely different slant, a totally different take, a much deeper understanding than we can get to through conscious talking. So it's really important to just to have access to deeper information is really what this is about.
The energy reading modality that I teach is all about, is through the higher self, is connecting with the messages. We don't connect with the messages of the guides, we connect with the messages of the higher self, that obviously connects with divine wisdom and universal knowledge as well. But it's been a game changer to see that, like, all the knowledge, all the books we can put sort of, to some extent, you know, they've been useful, but then the knowledge goes beyond, you know. And I kind of want to move on to the books you've written, because, you know, we talked about books and knowledge, and I feel like, in a way, what I love about channeled messages and channeled knowledge, in a way, it kind of goes beyond sort of conventional just ways of researching and which is all very important as well. Obviously, we need science, we need, you know, but I'd love to kind of know how much of that has come into your books. We've got The Girl with the Starseed Soul. Is it an autobiographical, I guess, book about your story, right? And
yeah, that's right.
And you're then connecting with spirit and connecting with more kind of channeled wisdom as well through it, and just the kind of your own journey of awakening. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, to be honest with you, it was something that I invested in to carry out my own healing. I felt as though I had so much in here of everything that I'd gone through. And, you know, at certain points, like we do, a timeline memory might come up. And I felt as though I'd been going over my story such a lot in my head. I needed to get it out. I needed to get it onto paper. And actually, it only took me 4 months, not even 4 months. I think it might have been less than that, to write.
All of you.
I needed it out, you know?
Yeah.
And once it was on paper, although nothing, you know, it hasn't been published, unfortunately, it's my book at the moment that's on a freeze, but it was so valuable to just get that story out, and also for me to read it back.
Yeah,
So there wasn't so much channeled information. It was just more about getting that story onto paper. But my second book is all channeled.
To me, that's a really beautiful motivation, though, you know, to write, because, you know, there's all these things needing to come through, and I do feel that the healing that can be facilitated through writing a book, getting all that stuff out, can be really important, but also it can really help people on their own journey. I think it's the book that I'm connected with the most to read. I'd love to hear about what would love say and what that is, because I think you said this is channeled information. I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, so it's the book that's recently been published. It's completely channeled. They are not my words. In May this year, I did a meditation in the morning, and I think I'd had a challenging QHHT session the day before. Not challenging from the point of view that, you know, the person was difficult to work with, but challenging for me to really acknowledge the amount of pain that human beings go through. And I was particularly affected by this session. And I did my meditation and I sat down and I said, what can I do to help the people? And I'm very connected to the energy of Jesus anyway, because I've had a past life with his grandmother. But I just felt this like force come through me, and the words started just appearing, and there was this voice, and it was talking, and it was like, start typing. And I was thinking, this is strange. I've never had this type of experience before. And I just started typing, and I was asking questions in my mind, and I was saying, what is consciousness? How was the soul created? What was it like at the beginning? I was actively asking these questions in my mind and then receiving the information. And I was just told to type. So I was sitting there typing, and I got to after a couple of months, I got to 40,000 words. And I sat there in front of my laptop one morning, and the energy just said to me, are you ready? And I was like, ready for what? And he just said to do the work, to write the book. And I said, okay. And he said, this is how we're going to help the people. And then the book just flowed. And it's not my information. It's nothing that I've ever read before. It's predominantly about, I've called it, I mean, I was told to give it a different name. And I had this argument with Jesus about what to call the book. And he wanted to call it a proverb of conscious thought. And I said, I don't like that. And he said, okay, what do you want to call it? And then we were working together on the premise of this book and what it was about. And it's really about love. And we were talking, I was typing one day, and then he said, what would love say? And I said, that's it.
So much. It feels also very kind of accessible, and it just like gets to the point. For me, it's when I hear it, I feel, oh, it's a book on aligning with love, on allowing love in and working in the sort of vibration of love. So I really love the name of it, and it feels like a really exciting one to be putting out there in the world, very, very exciting, Georgina. And I think that I just feel like, we've had this moment here today, and I feel like I just know that because of your depth and what I'm like there's so much more we can dig into everything. And on the same time, I feel this is a really good opportunity to kind of like let everything sit with whoever's receiving this, and to maybe say, for those who might want to connect with you further, to also I'll obviously get your socials and all your links and everything. I'll put them below this video on the YouTube channel, and people can connect a little bit more, other in relation to your books. I know you do channel sessions as well, so people can connect with you in that respect if they want to, or if they're local, because you do the sessions locally. You do your quantum healing locally in Southwick, which is just by Brighton, very nearby. So people can connect with you there if they want to. And yeah, I maybe we have another opportunity again in the future to talk a little bit more and open up to more things, because I feel there's a lot of like stuff that can continue pouring through there. I'd love to kind of, one of the ways I like to end these conversations on a very different note, to kind of like ask people if there's a particular kind of ritual or habit or little thing that you've got going on that you enjoy doing, that you can't live without, that you just particularly maybe enjoy at the moment, in your life. Is there something that is part of your life that gives value to you, that enhances things for you, or that you just enjoy? That you
Having a bath.
You too, Carl?
I could not live without my bath. I could say lots of really deep other things, but the bath and my dance music, that I cannot do without.
You're speaking my language now. Do you know that that's my thing 100%? I love that you do that. I it's beautiful. And you know, my guides made a really big connection with water, you know, and how that for me it's a big expansion thing, getting into a bath. It can sound simple and non-profound, but actually ends up being a lot more profound. It's a really magical, it's one of those elements that for me is like the most magical element that just is beautiful. And of course, the world of emotions as well, and an expansion agent and healing and clearing too. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. So, Georgina, it's been a real pleasure to have this space with you. I've absolutely loved the way you've held space for me, and it's been really precious. But I really love your, you know, how connected to, plugged into your mission you are, and how you're, you know, living your purpose so fully and clearly in love, being of assistance and serving people and supporting people to their own awakening. So thank you for bringing that to the world.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of my journey.
Thank you so much. And I kind of have a feeling that this might not end here somehow. So, but for this time at least, yes. So thank you everyone for watching as well. And we will speak again soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Lots of love.